"Oh my God, look at his cheap, muddy shirt," the voice echoed. Through the crystal-clear glass walls of the grand reception hall. It belonged to Victoria. She was wearing a dress that cost more than most people make in a year, and she was pointing right at a little 6-year-old boy who had just wandered too close to the indoor koi pond. The boy was wearing a faded, slightly oversized t-shirt and worn-out sneakers with dried mud on the edges. 180 high society guests stopped drinking their champagne. They all turned to look at the kid, like he was a stray dog that had somehow slipped past security. What Victoria didn't know was that her fiancé, Julian, was standing right behind a massive floral arrangement. Julian wasn't just the billionaire hosting this lavish engagement party. He was a guy who used to sleep in his beat-up car while trying to get his first business off the ground. He heard every single word she said, and before the night was over, that one arrogant sentence was going to cost Victoria absolutely everything. Before we get into exactly how Julian destroyed her perfect little world, I want you to make a promise with me right now. In the comments, type this exactly: "I promise I'm not afraid of failing. I am only afraid of losing my kindness." Go ahead and type that, because today's story is going to test exactly what you value most in life. Now, let me tell you how this whole mess started. Julian never even wanted this massive party. He was a quiet guy. He built his fortune in sustainable eco-resorts. He didn't care about crystal chandeliers or imported caviar. He agreed to the event strictly because Victoria begged for it. She told him she just wanted to celebrate their love with their closest friends. But looking around the room, Julian realized he barely knew a dozen people there. It was a performance. Victoria was treating their engagement like a networking event to prove her status. Meanwhile, down in the service corridors, a completely different reality was playing out. Arthur was the lead landscape and ecosystem technician for the estate. He was a single dad who poured his heart and soul into every single plant, pond, and tree on the property. Arthur was the kind of guy who never complained. He just put his head down and did the work. But today, life threw him a massive curveball. His babysitter canceled at 4 in the afternoon due to a family emergency. Arthur couldn't just walk away from his job. Tonight was the biggest event of the year, and he had to monitor the delicate aquatic systems running through the glass hall. So, he did what any desperate, hardworking parent would do. He brought his 6-year-old son, Leo, with him. Arthur set Leo up in the staff break room with a coloring book and a strict warning to stay put. But you know how 6-year-olds are. They have an attention span of about 5 minutes. Leo got bored. He wandered down the long hallway, drawn by the incredible lights and the sound of the string quartet. He peeked through the side doors, his eyes locked onto the massive, glowing koi pond that his dad had built with his own 2 hands. Leo just wanted to see the fish. He didn't want to bother anyone. He just stepped a little too far out of the shadows. That's when Victoria spotted him. She was standing by the champagne tower, surrounded by her wealthy friends. She didn't just ask him to leave. She didn't call for a staff member. She chose to make a spectacle out of it. "Who let the help bring their dirty kids into my party?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the soft music. "Look at his cheap, muddy shirt. This is a private event, not a charity shelter." The entire room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Behind the flowers, Julian froze. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He remembered being that exact same kid. He remembered wearing hand-me-down clothes that were 2 sizes too big. He remembered the way rich people used to look at his mother when she cleaned their houses. If you've ever been judged by the clothes on your back instead of the content of your character, pause this video right now. Drop that comment below. I promise I'm not afraid of failing. I am only afraid of losing my kindness. We need to drown out the noise of people like Victoria. Arthur had been checking a water pump in the kitchen when he heard the sudden silence. He rushed out into the main hall. When he saw his son standing there, surrounded by staring billionaires, all the color drained from his face. Arthur didn't panic. He didn't shout back at Victoria. He walked straight across that marble floor, with his head held high. He didn't cower or apologize to the wealthy guests. He just walked up to Leo, knelt down, and gently wiped a smudge of dirt off the boy's cheek. "Come on, buddy," Arthur said softly. "Let's go back to our spot." He picked Leo up in his arms. Victoria scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Next time, leave your stray at home, or find a new job," she muttered. Arthur stopped. For a fraction of a second, his jaw tightened, but he didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. He carried his son back into the dark service corridor, absorbing the humiliation, so his boy wouldn't have to. Julian watched the heavy doors swing shut behind them. He looked back at Victoria. She was already laughing with her friends again, waving her champagne glass like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just tried to crush a little boy's spirit. For absolutely no reason, Julian set his drink down on a nearby table. He didn't walk toward his fiancée. Instead, he turned and headed straight for the service doors. He walked down the narrow, fluorescent-lit hallway. The contrast between the glittering ballroom and the stark concrete walls of the staff area was jarring. It was a reality check. Julian could hear the clatter of pots and pans from the kitchen. He could hear the stressed voices of the catering staff, trying to keep up with Victoria's endless demands. He bypassed the kitchen and headed straight for the small, cramped break room at the end of the hall. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. Arthur was sitting on a cheap fold. Leo was sitting on his lap. Arthur wasn't crying, and he wasn't yelling. He was just holding his son tight. "I'm sorry, Dad," Leo whispered. "I just wanted to see the big fish you told me about." "It's okay, Leo," Arthur replied, his voice steady but heavy. "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't know how to see the beauty in things, unless it has a price tag on it." Julian leaned against the door frame, letting those words sink in. Arthur looked up and immediately jumped to his feet. "Mr. Julian, I am so sorry," Arthur said, his protective instincts kicking in. "My sitter backed out. I had no other option tonight. I'll pack up my tools and take him home right now." "It won't happen again." Julian just shook his head. "Sit down, Arthur," Julian said quietly. "You don't ever have to apologize for taking care of your son." Julian walked into the small room and pulled up another folding chair. He sat down, right across from them. A billionaire in a custom tuxedo, sitting in a dingy break room. He looked at Leo. The little boy was staring back at him, with those big, innocent eyes. Leo didn't see a billionaire. He just saw another guy sitting in the room. After a long moment, Leo reached into his small pocket. He pulled out a tiny, smooth pebble. It was a special biofilter stone Arthur used for the ponds. "My dad says this little rock cleans up all the dirty water," Leo said, holding it out to Julian. "Do you want to hold it?" Leo wasn't trying to impress him. He was just offering to share something he thought was cool. Julian reached out and gently took the pebble from the boy's small hand. "Thank you, Leo," Julian said, his voice cracking just a little bit. "It's a very good rock." Julian closed his hand around the stone. He thought about Victoria, standing out there in the ballroom. She had millions of dollars in the bank, designer clothes, and an elite education. But she didn't have an ounce of the generosity that this 6-year-old boy had just shown him. Julian knew exactly what he had to do. He looked at Arthur. "Don't leave," Julian said, his eyes burning with a sudden, intense clarity. "Stay right here, both of you. If you agree that a person's true wealth is measured by how they treat people who can't do anything for them, hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to drop our promise in the comments. I promise I'm not afraid of failing. I'm only afraid of losing my kindness." Julian stood up and walked back out into the hallway. The string quartet was playing a beautiful, upbeat melody. The glasses were clinking. The party was in full swing. But Julian was about to burn it all to the ground. Julian walked straight to the center of the room. He didn't look angry. He looked completely, terrifyingly calm. He walked past the champagne tower, past the wealthy socialites, and stepped right up to the small stage, where the string quartet was playing. He held up one hand. The band leader noticed the look in his eye, and immediately signaled the musicians to stop. The sudden silence was heavy. 180 guests turned to look at him. Victoria was standing near the front, her face lighting up with that perfect, camera-ready smile. She thought this was it. She thought he was going to make a grand, romantic speech about how lucky he was to have her. She glided over to the stage, looking like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. "Darling, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Julian looked down at her. He didn't use a microphone. His voice was just loud enough, and the room was just quiet enough that every single person could hear him. "I spent the first 25 years of my life being told I wasn't enough," Julian started. "I wore second-hand clothes. I smelled like the diner grease from my mom's night shifts. And I watched people like most of you in this room look right through us." The guests shifted, uncomfortably. Victoria's smile started to look a little strained. "Julian, maybe we should do this later," she whispered, stepping closer to grab his arm. He gently, but firmly, pulled his arm away. "I built this company from the dirt up," Julian continued, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "I promised myself that if I ever made it to the top, I would never let my house become a place where hard-working people were treated like garbage." He looked directly at Victoria now. 10 minutes ago, I watched the woman I am supposed to marry humiliate a 6-year-old boy, a boy whose father keeps this entire estate running. She didn't just ask him to leave. She mocked his clothes. She mocked his father's job. She did it to get a cheap laugh out of her friends. Victoria's face turned completely pale. "Julian, you're embarrassing me," she hissed, her voice trembling with panic. "It was just a joke. They shouldn't even be here." "No, Victoria," Julian said, his voice dropping to a low, absolute tone. "You're embarrassing yourself. You just showed every person in this room exactly who you are. You are incredibly wealthy, but you are the poorest person I have ever met." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, smooth biofilter pebble that Leo had given him. He held it up. "A little kid in dirty sneakers just gave me this rock because he thought it was cool, and he wanted to share it with a stranger. That kid has more class in his little finger than you have in your entire life." Julian stepped off the small stage. He walked right up to Victoria. "The engagement is over," he said. "I want you out of my house by tomorrow morning." There was no screaming. There was no dramatic music. Just the devastating sound of a billionaire taking back his future. Victoria stood there, frozen, her perfect image shattered, in front of all the elite friends she had tried so hard to impress. People started looking away from her. The same friends she was drinking champagne with just minutes ago suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Julian didn't wait around to watch her cry. He walked away, leaving the party to dissolve into awkward whispers. "Now, if you think Julian did the right thing, I need you to prove it. Scroll down to the comments right now and type our promise. I promise I'm not afraid of failing. I am only afraid of losing my kindness. That is the only thing that matters in the end." But the story doesn't end there. You see, Julian wasn't just interested in teaching Victoria a lesson. He knew that Arthur was the real deal. 3 days later, after the dust had settled, and Victoria was completely out of his life, Julian called Arthur up to his main office. Arthur walked in, looking nervous. He thought he was going to get fired for causing a scene. He took off his work cap and stood by the door. "Mr. Julian, I just want to say again how sorry I am about the other night," Arthur started. "I should never have let Leo wander off." Julian pointed to the leather chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Arthur," he said. Arthur sat. Slowly, Julian slid a thick folder across the mahogany desk. "I've been looking over the water filtration plans You submitted for the new eco-resort project, Julian said. The engineers told me. Your designs were too unconventional, but I had an independent consultant review them yesterday. They said your natural biofilter system is brilliant. It's going to save the company millions in chemical treatments over the next decade. Arthur stared at the folder, completely stunned. I don't understand, Arthur said. I'm just the maintenance guy. Not anymore, Julian replied, leaning back in his chair. I'm promoting you to head of ecological design for the entire Meridian Group. Your salary is tripling, effective immediately. And there's a clause in that contract. The company is setting up a full educational trust for Leo, from elementary school all the way through college. Whatever he wants to study, it's covered. Arthur's hands started to shake. He looked down at the contract, his eyes welling up with tears. This wasn't charity. This was validation for years of hard work, for every time he swallowed his pride to provide for his son. I don't know what to say, Arthur choked out. Just say you'll take the job, Julian smiled. And tell Leo I said thank you for the rock. Arthur signed the papers. That day, he walked out of that office a different man. He didn't just secure his own financial freedom, he secured his son's future. He proved that you don't have to step on other people to climb to the top. You just have to keep your head down, do the work, and never let anyone tell you that your muddy boots make you less of a man. And Victoria? She tried to spin the story to her wealthy friends, claiming she left Julian because he was too obsessed with work. But word had already gotten around. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who got dumped in front of 200 people for bullying a child. She faded out of the social scene, realizing too late that all the money in the world can't buy you respect. So I ask you, what kind of legacy are you building? Are you building a life that looks good on the outside, or a life that is actually solid on the inside? If this story meant something to you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you drop that promise in the comments. I promise I'm not afraid of failing. I am only afraid of losing my kindness. Stay strong, stay humble, and I'll see you in the next one.